Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mixtape Podcast. Today, my guest is Ayesha Husain. She is an author. She is an educationist, and she has recently come out with her debut novel called "What More She Could Want," which is published by Kitab. Welcome to the podcast, Ayesha.
Thank you so much, Papna. Thank you so much for organizing this. I'm really humbled and so excited. This is my first podcast.
Um, let's dig in. I read your book. I was there at your first book launch at the Last Word. We had a very interesting conversation. And my first question, before, because we're not going to go in depth in such a way that we give out the plot lines. But I would say, as I wrote in my review as well, that this is a story that we all know of. We have seen it. If we have not experienced it, we have heard somebody go through it. So why did you pick this as a story for your debut novel? And I'll just add a bit of context to it because during the book launch, it was mentioned and we discussed that your personal reading experience and interest has been more on the Shakespearean line. And from somebody with that background, and then starting with a story which is, a very domestic, they see a very subcontinent story, I would say. I would say even beyond subcontinent, we can say that, but a very typical and a very desi story told in a very interesting manner. So why did you pick this story?
I picked this story because it's a story that I knew very well. Having lived in the subcontinent, a Desi woman, having had, some of the experiences that I written about in the sense that I too was a very young person when I got married and all of that. And then, sort of, it became, like you said, so many women's stories put in one place. So Noor is not just one person. Many people put together as, one character and many experiences that I saw over the years, some friends, colleagues, because I also worked in an all-women environment. So the stories that I kept hearing and pretty much the same. And that is what inspired me to write about every, not every, I won't say it's every woman's story, but most women's story. So I thought I'd choose a simple enough story, which is heartfelt and genuine and simple. So, and it just seemed appropriate, to write about something I knew well. And talking about Shakespeare ki baat kar rahe the, so yes, Shakespeare's favorite playwrights, and I taught Shakespeare for many years. And so, and even in Shakespeare's works, look at his plays, they're very simple themes. The theme, ambition or greed, jealousy, etc. But simple themes ke around he creates those characters. And truly, the plays that I've enjoyed the most have been plays where you have an internal journey going alongside an external journey, like Macbeth, for example. So, and his speeches when he tormented are extremely moving, and you see his development of his character from one point to the next. From being honorable soldier and soldier and subject, and a very loyal subject, treacherous murderer. So that trajectory, and that is what inspired me to write, not just about particular themes, but also, highlighting certain themes through the story of one person from one point to the next, and showing her mental sort of journey alongside her physical journey.
So, as you said that, this is a story that you saw around and you sort of encompassed something in that Noor's character. So obviously my very pet question with fiction writers is that did the plot come first or did the characters came first? So with your first answer, I'm assuming the plot came first, but I would then ask you, because obviously Noor is the lead character, but she is not the only main character, I would say. So how did the character development came in?
Story I knew कि मैंने ये कहानी लिखनी है. I have to write about the girl and her journey into womanhood and maturity and all of that. So alongside her, of course, I had an idea of the kind of characters I would build characters that be a part of this novel. I knew there would be a husband. I knew there would be in-laws because I wanted to write about, a joint family system. And then as I wrote, so for example, Noor had a sister initially. In the first, second, third draft, there was a sister, but it was much later that I decided I want to highlight, I want to bring in a brother. Yeah. To highlight the patriarchy in our society, what the differences and how women and men are treated in a particular household, which is parent household, but still. So it's the way. And then as I was writing and then as we were editing, so my editor Musharraf was editing and Simran, who's in India, she was editing. So they would kind of give me ideas based on which I would develop the characters further. So it just happened as I wrote. It's not something I planned. The only thing I planned was this is the main character, this is the husband, these are the in-laws, and there will be a villain that comes. I knew that these characters would exist, but the others, like I had a sister, I changed her, a brother, big thing. But my even Leila's character came much later.
Yeah. Speaking of villains, we would assume, like, again, not giving anything away, that, there would be one specific villain and you would say, oh, the guy is the bad guy. But you didn't portray him as the bad guy. He was also, put in that circumstances, sort of somebody who followed the typical family system, the patriarchy system, and this is, and plus, I would not just say put in a system, this is the system he saw growing up. So he saw that, this is what a normal life should be, and whatever he's providing should be enough. So, speaking of villains, was this a conscious choice of like making sure that nobody comes across as a hardcore villain? And because when I read it, it came across as the problem was in the system. Everybody was as confused, roaming around as a headless chicken, thinking they are doing the right thing, but ending up making, a lot of trouble for Noor and maybe themselves as well. So was this a conscious choice or was it something that came with time?
Yeah, it was a conscious choice. It really was. Because like I said, I wanted to focus on her inner growth. There are times in the novel that I'm sure as a reader, you felt frustrated by her as well.
Yeah.
She's continuously either complaining or she's, you want to tell her to just get on with it. So I wanted the reader to feel irritated by her. I wanted the reader to see her flaws. I wanted to present real characters. So nobody's really bad and neither is anybody entirely poor. So, and there's a it's a quote that I really like by Oscar Wilde where he says that you can't sort of place labels on anyone because you can't say this person is good, this person is bad. जैसे पहले literature में हुआ करता था, 20th century onward literature changed and you necessarily had villains could be heroes or whatever. So his quote is every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. I mean, something along Oscar Wilde says. So that is what I was looking at. So Noor commits a sin, right? But till the end, you feel for her. I mean, you see her as a human being with flaws, impaired judgments, vulnerability, etc., etc. So yes, it was a conscious decision that no character should be all bad or all good. Idris, I feel, को मैंने redemption का वो नहीं margin दिया इतना ज़्यादा. But still, I mean, I feel that, yeah, every character is great. And the husband is not the villain. Right? You pointed very correct. He's also a victim of, his surroundings and what society is inculcating in both of them. Noor has more of a defiant spirit. She's more alive.
Yeah.
She wants to fight.
Yeah, and also I think the age difference aspect that you put in, which usually is pretty much nullified in our, this setup, where it's like, that's okay. With time, you get over it. It doesn't. And then I think there's also a mindset which says it's a good thing, because it brings stability to the equation. But as the story says, it can actually do the very opposite of it, because obviously people have like different temperaments with age difference, and with age you have like a different mindset, you have a different goal as you what you want out of your life. So all of this, obviously, as anybody as now people are also getting a bit of awareness about these, how this structure is sort of contributing to mental health. So throughout the story, there you touched upon some aspects of mental health, and some directly, some indirectly. Directly, where the character at one point is actually actively seeking out mental health support and not getting anywhere uh, with it, from be it her support from family, to the point where she ends up at a therapist and doesn't really. And this is also something I found interesting, because otherwise, because now that we have started talking about mental health, the assumption is that if you have the awareness, if you find a therapist, you're there, you're sorted. But that's not always the case. It's not that simple. Many times you cannot connect with your therapist, and that can contribute to, other. In the book, obviously, it just had this showed that, there was not, they were not in sync. But obviously, we know that a lot of serious issues also end up happening. And when you highlighted the mental health concepts, it was not just for Noor. Obviously, the kids were affected. The way they reacted, they were obviously suffering through some issues as well. So, how did you went about the research about, what mental health issues people can have? कुछ तो generalized होते हैं, कुछ you can actually assume, anxiety and depression. But obviously, the way you portrayed it, did you actually do some actual research into, figuring out how you can plug in the concepts?
So, not really. I mean, I studied psychology when I was in college, which was like 100 years ago. So, वो तो मैंने पढ़ा था. मुझे वैसे I was always very interested in literature and psychology. These were about the most. So my interest was always there. But as I started sort of, getting older and maturer and wiser, older, and saw life and all of that, I myself at the age of 39 decided that I needed help. It's a decision I took myself because I felt that, I've gone through so much of my life without really knowing who I am. A lot of my life, like Noor's, was just circling around children, rightly done, being a good daughter-in-law. That is what my life was. Of course, I was a working woman. So yes, my life was sort of in compartments. ये भी करना, ये भी करना, ये भी अच्छा करना. So the decision to take, go for therapy came simply because I thought I'm ahead on it. And that's a crisis that I went through at the age of 39. So that's, research because it's my own life.
Yeah.
But apart from that, because मुझे बहुत interest था in psychology में, so I started reading a lot. Like, जैसे मैंने Irvin Yalom is a psychiatrist, very well known psychiatrist. He's written a couple of books on, his sessions with his patients. Of course, he's fictionalized it a little so that nobody recognizes the patients. But so I read a lot of his books, and I saw how he was sort of talking to his patients and क्या issues they, how they resolved it. Then I read Gauri Kotnek, who's currently written a book called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. Then because there are lots of dreams in my novel, I read up on the interpretation of dreams by Sigmund Freud. थोड़ा सा वो पढ़ा. Then I also read, though it's not psychology per se, but psychologist तो नहीं है, but C.S. Lewis has written a book called, he's not written a book, it's a journal. There's a journal entries which his stepson put together and published, called A Grief Observed, which is also a very interesting, chronicles his grief. He writes, his wife died and loved his wife immensely. And she died of cancer, and then he started jotting down his feelings or what he did that day or how he felt. So that also was very interesting to see how his brain, what he's thinking, and how a year later, how it changes, how much it's changed. Things like that. I guess you could call that research, but
yeah, I think the sort of, because the sort of mental health issues that are covered in the book, I think what your personal experience as you have shared, and the stuff that you have read, I think they did have an input, and you could see that they are like managed in a very cautious manner. They are not like the terminologies and the incidents are not just thrown around. in a careless manner. Um,
I'm also this is also very, something that I feel very strongly about. Is there's so many therapists that have suddenly crop up, and I feel it's dangerous really to be counseling without proper degrees and without proper vision. Or I just feel so that is something I feel very strongly about. I think that people who choose to go to therapists should really do their homework, because I think diplomas really are not enough.
yeah, yeah. There have been disturbing stories as well, where therapists, instead of helping, they kind of actually drove the patients into a very different direction, and they were like, the patients were shamed. So yeah, so that is why I think that was you like brushed on that side, I think, as well. But again, that was a nice addition to it. Um,
Because I'm sorry, but because I've taught for like over 20 years,
mhm.
so part of my job was literally to analyze characters and emotions and motives and all of that. So मैं पूरी जिंदगी से यही करती आई हूँ.
Yes. So I think all of that did actually, it was sum up हो गया आपके वो books में. Um, so speaking of the characters, and obviously we know that there's Noor, who is the protagonist. Obviously, there's a husband. We have Noor's parents. We have her brother. So while writing, and as you said, कि you in the initial couple of drafts, there were other characters you took out and then added it in. Did any character's trajectory over the period of the book surprise you yourself while you were writing it? That when you started, you were like, even it could be Noor, it could be any other character, and that you had something else in mind, but while you were writing, वो एक होता है character development में, at times the writers are surprised. So did any of those your own characters surprise you?
We didn't.
Fair enough.
I was very conscious of. I wanted them to go in the direction that they.
Uh-huh.
Like what I see. I mean, even I think the son's support. Though I don't think it's surprising, because I myself have very supporting children. So the children support me a lot. So मुझे नहीं ऐसा कुछ surprise. These are, I mean, it's just right about things that are very important to me. For things that I wanted to write. So नहीं किसी character.
The son's characters that you mentioned, and what I liked about that was that obviously they're teenage boys, and teenagers don't always like react so rationally. And obviously, while you showed that they're obviously teenagers had reactions, I like the fact that they were boys, and it was okay. They were able to cry it out. They were able to, obviously, when there was a time they got angry at their mother as well. But there's a scene in the book where, she's trying to communicate with her sons, and they're pretty scared of what's going to happen. And the younger one is in the corner crying, just because seeing that the structure they found comfort in is going to break up. So yeah, that was, I think, more for anybody who's going to read the book, they might find it, I won't say reassuring, but sort of more opening, because usually, again, because the book tackles very typical our desi culture. It's शुरू से एक वो सिखाया जाता है ना, you're supposed to be strong, you're not supposed to show emotions. You like, so वो जो सारा suppress होता है, but it comes out in violence many a times. So the fact that that was not the character that was highlighted, that was, I think, something that a lot of readers are going to appreciate and like.
Again, done deliberately.
Yeah.
मैं दिखाना चाह रही हूँ कि इस तरह के लोग भी हैं और इस तरह के लोग.
Yeah.
Why not choose, be the kinder
one? Exactly. I think would help the overall situations a lot. Let's move on to the writing style. It's written in a very simple language, and again, I will connect it to your inspirations from the Shakespearean writing style. Anybody who would have attended your previous events and or have heard you say this mention, they might have went in with the assumption that they could, you know, वो at times in debut novels आपको inspirations और वो नजर आती है ना, थोड़ा सा वो patterns नजर आते हैं. But two things that actually I think helped made it into a very fast-paced read while tackling such a difficult subject was, I think, the simple writing style and the short chapters. So, was it Musharraf's idea? Was it your idea? Whose idea was this?
I mean, yeah, I think a lot of it was Musharraf. I have to give him a lot of credit. I think a lot of this novel is, I mean, the novel is there because he's the one who really encouraged. And then Simar, who sort of edited a lot and, you know, gave me case for that essay hum pad lein, or he just give me ideas. But yeah, technically, Musharraf ne kafi cut pit kiya tha. In fact, he, when I gave him my first draft, he was, I mean, I printed it out and gave it to him, but he so, you know, started, yeah, my pride and joy I'm handing over to him, and he sent it back to me some weeks later with cuts, big cuts, you know. And so that was quite, and then I was like, this, hey, basically, yes, my inspiration was Dickens. I love Great Expectation. I like certain, you know, works of certain writers. मैं सारा नहीं कहूँ कि मैं पूरे works पढ़ चुकी हूँ. Great Expectations really, Macbeth की तो फिर most of his plays that I thought, especially the tragedy and Dog. And I also, you know, anything that was, and I noticed कि जो मुझे बहुत चीज करती थी अंदर that I would read past were the ones that were the simplest. You know, written really simply. जैसे poetry में भी आप देखो, I mean, me जैसे वो the road not taken, it's just simple, but everybody quotes it because it touches something in. For me personally, I feel that simple writing, done right, can sort of have a more more powerful effect. आप थोड़े से लफ्जों में बहुत कुछ कह दो और बहुत सिंपल तरीके से अपनी कोई बात कन्वे कर दो, and that's something that sure, I mean, don't tell, show. And you know, because for example, there was जिसमें एक आपने वही chapter है where she's talking to God and it ends with after every hardship no soul does not want more burden than she can take. उसके बाद मैंने explain किया and this and that, and I went into great descriptions and cut it. I said, no, just leave it like that. Let this is enough. Let the reader think. So yeah, I give a lot of credit to him for that. And the chapter key headings were all, I mean, I wanted heading. Just keep the reader intrigued and wanting to read more. That's, I mean, and it's a style that comes very naturally to me. जब भी मैंने लिखा है, simple, I mean, I feel that adjectives को pair आप interestingly कर सकते हैं to convey or create an image. And I imagine when I'm writing, I have a whole story. It's like it's a pain that's going on in my head. तो पहले मैंने the story is all as a picture, as a movie in my head. I've seen it, and then I write. पहले मैं लिख रही थी और जब मैं लिख रही थी, again very Dickensian like, I would go on and describe certain things, flowers, descriptions, people's facial expressions in great detail. That too, then Musharraf, you know, we toned it down. He said, if these are the descriptions, matter. And I also recognize today's reader is a reader that wants to read, wants a novel that is like quick and easy to read. But that was really not my concern. It's just something that naturally came. Simple and straightforward.
Yeah, and I think it, other than where, you know, the fact that you left things, you could actually, there was a lot of emotional connect, specifically when she was going through her emotional roller coasters. You could actually, you know, ride with her. And many times while it, I think I feel that the short chapters made it more like fast-paced read. You wanted to know what's okay. This is where this is ending. What's happening next? But when you needed a breather, because there were times when you needed to take a step back, wo jo ek situation hoti na, can this person get a break? Wale jo points थे, then you were not like leaving in mid chapters and you know getting sort of like wo jo readers का एक वो होता है कि you know you want to know but you need like pace breaks चाहिए होते हैं. I think that was pretty well done. Speaking of the title, what more could she want? It can be read in both ways. Again, given the storyline, um, everything. Because I remember this. I was before when I got the book, I put it on my Instagram, and I actually got a couple of comments saying, "Hopefully, this is not going to be a very typical story." And I was like, let me start and I'll get back to you guys. And it didn't turn out. It was a typical story, but obviously it had um, told in a very realistic manner, but obviously not something which you would expect a TV drama to showcase our Desi culture in. It was not told like that. So how did you just came up with this decision? Because I think you mentioned this in one of your book launches as well, and that you can change the tone of how you read it, and the title will mean something different. So, but for somebody who doesn't is obviously has not interacted with you before, doesn't know your thought process, do you think that that title would can at times confuse, or what was the thought process behind it?
Um, so when I was writing the novel, midway somewhere, I sort of knew I would want, I knew ye technology. Because throughout the novel, the mother-in-law, the various people who are telling her, what more could you possibly, what kya chahiye? I feel this title encapsulates the concept. Dekne mein you have everything.
Yeah.
Then what is it? What's the problem? And that is something I think women who kind of maybe go against the current or complain a little more than they should are always told that maybe tell them, I I don't know, silence them or to make them feel, I don't know, make them feel guilty for even thinking this way, or to keep them in check ताकि ज़्यादा वो ना हो they don't fly away and keep them, tame them or keep them in check or whatever. So for me, it was right at the beginning. I knew that I'd like this to be the title, but I wasn't sure. Musharraf wasn't very, he's like, I don't know, let's see. So then we sort of many titles. One of them was Within and Without. And then another one was, I suggested Becoming, but then Michelle Obama beat us to it. And, so different titles, काफी सारे थे. And then eventually, at the end, we didn't have a title. Completely, सब कुछ हो गया. Titling thing. And I said, but Tushar, this is what I really like. What do you think? And I spoke to Simar, my Indian editor, and she immediately said, yeah, this totally works. Although ये reservation थी कि बहुत लंबा title है, what more would she? But then we stuck with it, and Simar loved it, and then it just sort of Musharraf agreed, and we said, I think it does, because so one of the things is that yes, it's encapsulating the conflict. The other thing is that you could look at it both ways. That finally, she's got everything. You've got everything. Ab aur kya chahiye? Because you've perhaps attained a kind of clarity or peace or acceptance or whatever it is, where you don't want. You're fine. Or it could be, looked at the other angle as a conflict.
So, again, like coming back to that main crux and the theme of the book, which is our current so Desi system, and how this male dominating system, you sort of women are moving around on a survival mode sort of a thing. And this is happening since generations, and now there are people who are trying to break free from the mode. So we can sort of in a nutshell say the outline of the theme of the book. But obviously there are phases, and every reader is going to take away. Just now title ki baat hum kar rahe the, it can be seen as a conflict. It can be seen you can just read it in a different tone, and you will perceive it in a different manner. So and usually like when authors se pooche na ki what do you think you want to give the message from this book, and I like recently LLF pe bhi kafi ho raha tha, to kafi authors se ye sawal pucha gaya, they were like, we have written the book the way we wanted it. Now it's up to people how they want to take it. So I would not like ask you like, Kim, what message do you want to get to readers to take from it, but any specific, maybe it's a nuanced thing or a major theme that you hope that, if this is one thing that people take away from this book, this is it. Uh, what would that be?
That would be the last three lines of the novel. That I don't know if I should read those three lines out or not, but the last three lines would be what I mean, the message of the story. And actually, अगर आप शुरू का वो dedication भी देखो, it is dedicated to not just women. I've dedicated my women and men who have battled with dark days and perseverance. Perseverance, courage. It's a story of courage, actually. It's a story of hope. And I do hope that, sir, any Noor out there who's feeling hopeless or despondent can find some kind of courage in this story. Anyone who feels not good about themselves or have done certain things in their lives which they're not proud of should, hopefully come away with, feeling it's okay. It happened. That's what I would. And also any individual should it would be, I would hope that any reader would recognize vulnerability and the decisions we take in certain moments of weakness, which can sort of terribly impact on our lives, and recognize that we have vulnerability, recognize the sadness, find help for it, and also recognize women, especially recognize predators like that. So really, there's not one particular message, it's just a story. And I feel, well, whatever, just for people, whoever wants to take away whatever they like, I hope people enjoy it. And yes, it is a story of hope.
Yeah, it is. And the lines that you are referring, if you want to read it, I think you can read those because they encompass a lot of things. When I read it, I was like, yeah. And both also connect bhi karte na, because that concept of home is basically many a times used as maybe, the shackles and the thing that you were mentioning, to curb women, एक mold बनाया हुआ है, then mold of success, this is your life goal. मतलब if you have achieved this, you are done. You have basically aced life and that's it. There is nothing else. So those lines about home were actually, I think that will connect with a lot of people, just like the story would. Thank you so much for your time. Before we leave, because this is your first novel and you are obviously now in or like on the map, and I think previously also said that this is something you have always wanted to do. So are you working on something else? Is it too early to ask you about the next project?
No, well, it's not too early to ask me. I've been thinking about the next plot since a while, actually. I haven't really gotten around to doing anything about it, right? Because I was working somewhere which most of, I was consumed by the work that I was doing. I was working on a World Bank project, which has just ended. And very recently, I lost my father. So I've just not been in the headspace to really think of anything. I do have a story, but I want to take a little bit of time and then come back. I do want to write. Let's see. But ये तो मुझे पता है that I do want to continue writing. It gave me immense pleasure. I enjoyed the process immensely. And that is something I share with the readers and just write simple, heartfelt novel.
Best of luck. And we're really looking forward to your next project. And hopefully we will connect again and we will talk about it as well. And thank you so much for writing the story. I'm pretty sure in the sense that I think I've recently also connected you with somebody else as well. They've actually loved the book and it's getting a lot of positive response. So hopefully you will continue to enjoy this success until the next project. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Papa. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Lovely chatting with you.
Thank you.